Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. Hello, and welcome to Meet BOA Authors, a collaboration between BOA Editions and Writers and Books. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a literary center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for people of all ages and backgrounds. You can find more information at our website, wab.org. Writers and Books would like to call attention to the complex and troubled history of the lands on which we live and work. We are convening this event from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Onondaga, or the people of the Great Hill. In English, they are known as the Seneca people, or the Keeper of the Western Door. Please say hello in the chat and feel free to submit any questions. Books are available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll provide the link in the chat. We're so happy to have Dustin Pearson with us this evening. First, we'll hear him read, then he'll be in conversation with Peter Connors, publisher and executive director of BOA Editions. The poems in Dustin Pearson's A Season in Hell with Rimbaud form an allegorical travelogue chronicling two brothers' mutual descent into hell. When the older brother runs off, the younger brother begins roaming hell's different landscapes in search of him. Pearson leads the speakers on a speculative epistolary journey through the nether realm. Dustin Pearson is the author of 3 poetry collections, including A Family as a House and Millennial Roost. His poems have been featured in Bennington Review, Blackbird, The Literary Review, The Nation, Poetry Northwest, Poem a Day, Saranac Review, TriQuarterly, Vinyl Poetry, and elsewhere. He is the recipient of the 2015 Katherine C. Award, the 2019 John Mackay Shaw Award from the Academy of American Poets, and of fellowships from Cave Canem, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing, and the Anderson Center at Tower View. Dustin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining in on the virtual launch for this book. It's really exciting. So I'm going to read 9 poems for this component. And I'm going to be starting with the title poem of the book. It's called A Season in Hell with Rimbaud. I dreamt I was showing my brother around in hell. We started inside the house. Everything was brown besides the white sheets in the bedrooms. I let him look outside the window, told him it was hottest there, where the flames rolled against the glass, as if a giant mouth were blowing them, as if there were thousands caught in the storm, pushing it onward with mindless running, save a desperation for something else. How had there been a house in hell and we invited with time to spend? Why was it I hadn't questioned how I got there? My brother growing so tired from the heat? The sweating? Surely we could open the door, he said. Surely there'll be a breeze. Even seeing already. Even burning himself on the doorknob. His eyes turned back in his head, working his way to the bedrooms. Staining the sheets with his blistered hands. And though I knew the beds weren't for the rest of any body, I sat by and let him sleep. This poem's called A Scheme. My brother and I used to scheme to make money. It was our way of coping with the tiny allowances our father gave us. A coping he didn't realize would make us creative. My brother, less so, because his allowance was always double mine. Those days were adjacent to digging for treasure in our backyard, of looking into a blue sky and dreaming of being sailors, discovering large chests of jewels under the ocean. The world had so many limits back then, imposed by a man who became a dad, so the grudge he held against his family would pay attention to him. But even looking at the perimeter, the ordinary localized possibilities of a house whose backyard was marked by a boundary of gray wood, we became masters of projection. We never sold lemonade in the street. It was what the other kids in the neighborhood and the kids on TV were doing. But perhaps they were happy. Perhaps they didn't know selling sweetened citrus in a Dixie cup full of vital liquid for a quarter or 50 cents was no amount of money that could take them anywhere. Perhaps under their houses wasn't a fire whose fingers curled around them. Souls side by side. My brother and I had souls to swirl vast darkness. To that debt, we gave our dad everything. His hands locked around our faces until he left. He's come back to two men who can only move to knife the other, who can only reach to cleave. He creeps around us, pining like he hadn't died when he first left. Father, why are you dying? We killed you. You should be dead. Dying aspects. At some point, everyone I knew came to realize we're dying much quicker than we thought we would. We were as polite as we could be about it in conversation over brews and breakfast. Pollen breathe on clear days and park benches. We never called it what it was, always opting for its implications. Food intolerances, allergies, and aches. The pain in my thigh seemed to appear overnight, but a creeping of years had brought it on. When I tried, I couldn't name the years my body was painless, but I thought the period would last longer. In my sprint to worthiness, I guess it's not unreasonable for some pain to come in the third decade. I've been working so hard to enjoy this life. The needs of human beings can be massive the way we've insisted on meeting them. In hell, time stopped working against my brother and me. We'd never die, so there was no rush. But there was also no need to let go of the debate. Who between the two of us loved who most? Who had more of God inside of him? And who was the better child? As if the world were one in which things didn't grow. As if you would be praised for remaining a child in a world in which things did. No death would bring about a regret worth forfeiting these superlatives. No matter the pains, in hell, we'd both live through them. So this next poem is called In Hell's Ocean, I Come Upon a Man Wanting His Son's Approval. And though I'm only one, I know the man in the corner is my father, even as his body is tucked in sand, his skin gelatinous, with blue rings that glow on several limbs. When he stirs the limbs, black grains curl around them. I'd never unknow that face and the look on it, He lies as big as God in the minds of believers, but when he stands a man that fits in the palm of my hand. So I lift him. His limbs glide through the water. It's near invisible music as a dancer's. When I begin to swing my head, he copies the movement. And when I stop, he stops as if discouraged. So I start again. I encourage him. I raise him to be strong and confident, with confidence he'd never give. His worn face turns young again, and over seconds, his head and body age old again, and I see his hell is a magic I break by forgiving him. And I forgive him, so he'll die, being the man he just learned he always wanted to be. And when it's done, he shatters. His shards crumble a dust of blue shimmers, and he releases. Leaves wounded and clever suns with still burning flames inside them, undoused by hell's darkest hold, in its only ocean, and unfathered, with no children to find or be found by, but at least knowing hell is a place you walk in after you cut the heart open. Okay, so I have in my notes at this point in time to say that I'm very happy today. And thanks for being here. Thanks again for being here. This next poem is called Fossil Fuel. Thanks, Michael. Moments after hell's ocean allows you to reach its surface, the world turns over. You dart through the boiling waters like a rocket straight into one of its geysers. It gropes you. It coats you in waste as inside a bow. But once fully committed, it's you who becomes the movement. The journey is dark, so your mind illuminates. All those bodies floating at the top of the water and not one of them moving. You tilt your head downward, but there's nothing to see. No chest, feet. Until you remind yourself there's still parts of your body. And the sky is red or pink, or maybe pink and red with no stars. And then everything flips, as though the sky could fill. As if this part of hell were in cylinder, filled with liquid, filled with rocks and sand, and living ornaments some giant child could turn over for amusement. And you fall, or you float, or you fall and float headfirst into another world you can escape. You surface in a place that looks like the world you left, or one adjacent where you can manage, where you did manage. Out of the geyser, you rise like a man pulled from quicksand. You clear the mud from your eyes. The sun blinds, but then you see. This world is one of vast greens and sharp shapes, attached to brown trunks and vines. You wipe the mud from your limbs, and when you've cleared them, you wish you hadn't, because the flies that attach to them bite. And where they bite, the blood runs, and from where it runs, mites burrow. And within the burrows, you're compelled to scratch, and where you scratch, the burrows widen, and from the widening, the blood pours, and in the pour, the dead mites. You feel faint, but you realize you've walked a ways from where you started. The loss is overwhelming, but ahead of you, there are tracks. You want to fall, but think, not again. And you think, no matter the man the tracks belong to, you must find him. Three more poems. A difference. I wish I could explain the danger that lies in a look through a window. People will say, why not draw the shades? It's a beautiful day outside. Having seen, I'll agree, but left alone with the view, the beauty tugs so strongly on my eye that the vessels inside it break. And so the beauty bleeds. The sky stirs. Red leaks into the blue. The sky turns purple marvelously, but the red keeps leaking until there's only red, a red so rich, so high in the sky. And the wind blows. All the trees lose their greens. The waters wash over the grounds, and then in the sky, there's lightning. It strikes in straight lines, then arcs and branches. Then the branches become limbs that swirl everything together. The window I look through and the room I'm sitting in are fine. And then at some point, the world interrupts. This time, it's my brother. I recognize his knock, even if it's different. When I open the door, his hand is a fist hanging away from his arm, and himself like a bird feeder, wrapped and bound by a loose stretch of skin. It seems to swing a bit and twist, as if someone were giving it a gentle spin. It occurs to me, my brother used it to get my attention. He wanted me to see. Had he experienced the day like I had, only to this difference? His room was just up the stairs. By the light up there, he'd also drawn the shades and stared in. His wrist was broken, but he'd gotten both of us away from it. He hadn't said anything and wouldn't answer, even as I popped him in place, even as I wrapped the bandages around him. Guess I could have given you all a better view of my window for that one. We'll just leave it there. Murky water. There's a rush I get fishing in murky waters. What lives inside them can't easily be seen. I'm unnerved being brought into proximity with the other senses that let me know I found something. It's horrifying when the body I've managed to snag on the hook is heavy. And as I pull it toward the surface, I absorb its violent lashes on the line. The hook through its body, an imposition, letting loose a vital flare through the waters, and a loosening red streak as the creature phases vaguely between several shapes and colors. I think for a moment, there's a possibility what I've caught is a monster the world has never seen. I've seen the surface of Hell's Ocean. I've passed through its waters. There is no coast to sit on which to receive anything. I'm the only one who's ever come fishing. And though there are millions of bodies in Hell's waters, and none of them are biting for not being hungry, I've only come for my brother. I hope he'll find me, that he won't leave me waiting. But then again, I'm nervous. I hope his pulling on the line is something I recognize, that the brutality of the waters could leave room for the possibility he'll be happy to see me. The waters in hell are burning, and so too will my brother when he comes. From where he comes, his flesh will have eroded. His flesh will be wet and exploding. And perhaps his eyes will be cloudy. And if he has the power of speech, there's no telling he'll use it. And if he uses, there's no telling, there's no guarantee what he'll say. So while I wait in his pulling to the surface, I pray the sight of him won't change my thinking. I want to be brave to bring him in. but there's no telling what in the distance has happened. I pray, somehow, on his way up, I don't drop him back in. Okay, and so the last poem I'll read for this component. It's fun looking at the chat. Thank you, Aga. It's called Things I've Thought, Things I Do. Things I've thought, things I do. Your brother is as strong as an ox. There are always people telling me that. I think maybe because I was short, still taller than he was, and skinny, or at least it seemed because of the clothes I wore. His body was bulky, no fat to be seen, and everyone stood in awe of its feats. Without breaking, he could clap a boulder to dust. But I didn't mind being invisible for being a mystery, didn't mind receiving the intel as a kind of disbelief. They were unwilling to look at both of our faces. Without heroics, what strength does it take to walk willingly? For one's mind to be so clouded by other pains, fire becomes a best rescue. I don't like to, but when I think about it, my brother and I had done the same thing. He walked out of our house into hell's engulfing to get away from voices he couldn't quell. But being the only one left in the house, the only thing I could see he got away from was me. Had I listened to the people my brother shared his life with, the people volunteering to tell me who he was, I might have believed hell couldn't ravage my brother's body. Brother, who in your life would you walk through fire for? The thought of asking that question used to bother me. Having to listen to a list that didn't include me, or thinking the one name you'd say wouldn't be mine. If you asked me, I don't think anyone would come to mind. At least, not anyone on the outside. I considered that a failure in my life. Where we stood was already burning. Brother, I never thought my answer would be you. I'm not disappointed like I thought I'd be. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, can you hear me okay? Excuse me, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, definitely.
That was excellent. It was so great hearing you read those poems. That was really, really cool. Thank you for doing that. So I just want to ask you some questions about the book, and we can chat a little bit about it. If anybody wants to post questions in the chat, feel free to do that, and I'll read those too. So my first question is, at what point in the writing process did you make the connection to Rimbaud, and how did his work inform your book?
Yeah, I'd say that Rimbaud has always been like a specter of like even like my early writing. I remember taking workshops at Clemson University and talking to various people in the department who'd read or had heard about my poetry, and they would say things like, "You'd be interested in these French symbolist writers," and it was kind of easy for me to be like, "Okay," because I didn't know who they were, so I'd be like, "Oh, thanks," and then I wouldn't read them, but that. I kept on being compared to those writers. So when I started to read them, I started to say, oh, okay, they have something in common with, you know, these kind of like Southern Gothic traditions that I was brought up in, you know, just being from Somerville, South Carolina, but growing up in the Charleston area, you know, there's a kind of Gothic sensibility and a really strong element of storytelling to that area. And I think that that was just what I was channeling in my work more so than anything else. But in coming to research the French symbolist writers, there was like a strong correspondence between, the Southern Gothic writers and the French symbolist writers. They had like a great admiration for at least Edgar Allan Poe and translating those works. So the way that I like to talk about this book is, A Season in Hell is largely known to be Rimbaud's kind of like emotional fallout from his breakup from Verlaine. This isn't a romantic, there's not a romantic context to this book. It's between two brothers, but I think that's similar, like that this big emotional kind of like event that amounts from these two brothers basically parting ways with each other. And so I think it's more of like a spiritual connection and a kind of throw to the abstractness of emotion, but also kind of balancing that with this Southern Gothic sensibility that's so concrete in a lot of ways. So I feel like I'm taking that emotional aspiration and making it concrete with the Southern Gothic features.
I think, definitely like one of the thing about the symbolists in particular is there's that sense of anything could get surreal or dreamlike or, out there at any given moment. And this clearly has that same sensibility. And I'm thinking of the very first line of the collection, the title poem, I dreamt I was showing my brother around in hell. And just, the fact that you have the word dreamt in the very first line, in the very first poem, just brings in that concept of, I'm going to just call it sort of like an alternate consciousness, that you're bringing in this sort of dreamlike state. And I'm curious if that, let's call it, we'll stick with that word, that alternate consciousness, like, does that play a role in your writing process?
Yeah, I think so. I like that as a pointing. One of the ways that I usually describe like my relationship to allegory are these like more magical features. It's not escapism. It's just a way that I can honor the kind of distortion of, like my unique emotionality or my unique psychology with the experiences that I've had. And so I think that there's the reality that everyone can recognize in their experiences, and you use a bunch of familiar terms to describe or come to terms with those experiences. But I think throwing into allegory kind of like honors the uniqueness. You have to figure out what the terms are that enable you to mine insight or to make more sense of it than what you're given. And I think that's what drives people to write anyway. Like they have these experiences that are in some ways unsatisfying and they write to get more out of them. But I think I'm just lucky plugging into these kind of allegorical structures and these symbolist structures to do the same thing, kind of mining more insight out of experiences that I've had or experiences that I'm curious about.
Because there's so much like heavy, dark, and sort of like that surreal, dreamlike, let's say often like nightmare-like imagery. I'm curious, like, did you ever find it filtering into your actual dreams or your imagination in that way?
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily the images in this book. Well, I don't know. I guess you could say that the images that I'm able to write in this book are images that have circulated with me for a long period of time. I think I said somewhere that this book is inspired by an argument that I had with one of my brothers 10 years ago. But I've always just had like a really active imagination. And so like, I think like some of the imagery does filter into the writing from just my normal, I don't know, I guess it's not uncommon for me to have dreams that I can put into the writing rather than the writing inspires dreams or the writing bleeds into my dreams.
Do you ever, I'm curious, is any of this like, do you write down your dreams? Do you sort of like, is that a part of the process at all?
No, I don't write down my dreams at all. I think like when I do remember them, I'm just like, oh, that was really cool. That was exciting. And then I just let them go. But I do think that they kind of just like, they get buried and they come back. Like, I don't know, maybe I did write some of the dreams that I've had in this book and I just don't realize that connection.
Right. So in the poem Beacon, you have a line that is, the first time I made my brother cry with words felt like a victory. And when I read that, there's that sort of sibling dynamic that's obviously there. But I also heard like the seeds of a poet, discovering the power of language. And I'm curious if, is that a fair leap to make? And in these pages, because you're talking so much about your youth, can we also see this as the development of a poet?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of funny to me, but I think like one of the things that was very apparent with even with like my parents is just like the radical differences between like my brother, like me and my other siblings. I've just like, I think like I talked the earliest. Like I've always had this relationship with language and storytelling that my brothers didn't have. Not to say that they're bad with language, but we have different abilities. And so yeah, I think that like the reliance that the speaker has on language and just not wanting to enter into physical realms until I guess like the occasion of this schism between the two brothers, it definitely feels like it has a lot to do with the figure of a poet and how the poet navigates the world through language.
For people, especially who, might have a manuscript or be trying to publish and for the first time, could you talk just some about like the process of how this, how long it took for the book to come together, sort of that process, and also making your way towards publication?
Sure. Okay, so it's a little bit wild with this book because I wrote the title poem the last year of my MFA, so that was 2017, and I thought it was just going to be one poem. And then I showed it to one of my professors there, and the poem was called A Season in Hell. And then after I showed it to my mentor, he loved it. Mentor's name is Norman Doobie, but he loved it, and he said, maybe you should just add with Rimbaud to the end of this poem. That way the brother in this poem isn't just a brother. And at that time I was just like, okay, sounds good enough. But what that made me do was just to think about it over and over again. My second book is kind of like impressionistic. There are a lot of portraits exploring family and family dynamics, but there's not really this detailed kind of interpersonal dynamic that's explored between any of the characters in that book. And so I guess as I started to think more and more about my past experiences, I was like, okay, there's a real opportunity here for me to expand. And so I started writing like a couple of poems. I think after my second book got picked up during my PhD, and then I got a residency at the Anderson Center. And then the writing kind of just came, like the first draft of this book came during that month when I was at the Anderson Center. And then I like the next, I don't know when the deadline was for the open reading period for BOA, but I sent that kind of like really rough draft, what I felt was a rough draft, to BOA in the mail. And I got the call from you. Whenever I got it, I like to tell some people this story, but I was sitting on top of my bed, just eating like potatoes and onions and eggs, just thinking I was going to be like a sloth for the day. And then I saw that I got a phone call from Rochester, New York, and I was like, well, I'm definitely not answering that because that's a telemarketer. And then I got your message, and then I was just like, oh wow, that's so absurd. So I had to gather myself, put like the breakfast down. I don't think I returned to eating it, and it was just pretty quick. So I'm glad that we had those 2 years between that phone call and the publication for me to just really sharpen everything.
I do think it's important to have a gap. I think sometimes, people want that sort of immediate, acceptance and then publication. But I think knowing that a book is coming out makes you look at it a little differently. It puts a different lens on it. And I'd love to talk some about the illustrations in the book. So this is one of the illustrations that's on the cover, but then throughout the book, there are illustrations, black and white, up so people can see a little bit, illustrations. So I'd love to hear about the artist and also how you felt like these worked with the book, how they enhanced the book.
Yeah. So the artist's name is Nathan Mullins, and somebody that I met during my time at getting my PhD at Florida State University. After I knew that this was going to be a book, we had tried to collaborate on my previous book, but then the timelines didn't work out. So we just talked about, I told him that there were 6 section breaks and that I envisioned like that he would produce 6 images. And I really didn't give him any guidance. I just said, this is the book. You can read it and do whatever you want to do. Definitely do whatever you want with this. It's just, I think like the only guidelines that I mentioned was that I have like this sensitivity to textures and, you know, this kind of Gothic feel that I felt was already in his work. So he read the book and he came back, like I got to see the images in progress. And I think what was really illuminating for me is like his take on the book. Like he just really emphasized that the figure of the brother in this book, at a certain point in time, it becomes really unclear whether or not the speaker is actually chasing his brother, or if he's just like chasing a doppelganger of him, like his doppelganger. And so I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. But that's not a conclusion that I would have naturally drawn to myself, you know, because I think like in a certain way, like this is just one journey of the speaker talking to himself and really not yielding, I guess, like the typical outcome that people would expect from a story like this one.
So I'm curious if there are any poets or books or even like literary journals that you're particularly interested in right now, or that you'd like to talk about a little bit.
Oh yeah, so one of the things that I've been able to do at the University of Tulsa is kind of bring my love of Gothic traditions, specifically American and Southern Gothic, to the classroom. And so I think it's really fun looking for poets who kind of like imbue their poetics with those kinds of considerations. And so I'm thinking about one poet specifically. Her name's S.E. Stone, and she has this collection of poetry called What It Done to Us. And I love it. It's a completely different expression on American Gothic. But I love how, you know, the American Gothic gives you great this kind of like freedom to really just make whatever inquiry that you want to make, and kind of explore it in a way that you would typically think of as taboo. So it basically gives you the excuse to go after whatever this thing is that you're repressing the most and explore it in one of the most visceral ways through the image and through like emotion. So I really love Essie's work. I feel like more people should know about it.
Oh, good. So I put the title, I was just going to ask if you would type that in for everybody. So the title of that book and the poet's name is on there. Thank you, Sai. Dustin, it was so good talking to you and hearing you read your work. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to have you read one more poem and I will sign off for the night. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Everybody. So the final poem, oh, I guess I'll just say it's like every writer dreams of their like rock star moment. So I feel like I love that this program builds like an encore into things. But the last poem that I'll read is also called Things I Thought, Things I Do. My brother used to say it would only take one punch to put me in the hospital. Long before he made telling me a habit, when the piles of muscle he grew into mountains stretched trenches in his skin, I knew. Taunted with the inevitable that long, I ran over and over, straight toward it. I couldn't be powerless if I made him do it. I'd rush him. He'd wrap his arms around my arms, lift me into the air, and set me back down again. It went like this. So many episodes of his waiting for me to finish. Not realizing I ran toward him, wanting, then waiting for him to finish me. All those times I pictured myself in a bed under sterile lighting, hooked up and comatose, or dead. We had no idea we were getting exactly what we wanted for how different the picture rendered in our heads. I could never take my brother at his word. I'd put so much faith in words. I thought the thing about the hospital meant that's what he wanted. So I was happy to leave him. I pretended I didn't mind it. I didn't mind the method. Brother, why did you insist so much on saying it? Even when it was obvious that wasn't what you wanted, I think it took so long to sink in because I couldn't answer that question. How many laughs had I missed out on all those times being lifted into the air rushing up and again, my legs kicking like on rides I was so excited about, sitting hours in line through summer heat at the theme parks. Brother, who could have told us the fun we were having? These days, when I sift through the past like this, when you're lying next to me on the bed before you're lost again, I'm trying to tell you what I will miss. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you to Dustin. Thank you to Peter. I want to thank everyone for coming. Buy the book. The link is in the chat. Hope you can join us next week. Our poet will be Gabrielle Lucille Fuentes. And I want to thank everyone and have a great night. Take care.